So, I know what you're thinking. Why is that incredibly handsome hedgehog being chased by a madman with a mustache from the Civil War? Well, to be honest, it feels like I've been running my whole life. Is this too much? Am I going too fast? It's kind of what I do. You know what? Let's back up.
Okay, let's all go. Let's go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen? It's a show where we talk about movies and specifically talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, aka TV's Travis. This is episode number 308. And our movie this week from 2020, it's Sonic the Hedgehog. And here to talk with me about it, because he hadn't seen it, it's Anthony Vito. How you doing?
Hey, TV's Travis. Thanks for having me on. Long-time
Absolutely.
listener, first time a guest. So looking forward to it.
Well, number one, thank you for listening. That's awesome. And number two, excellent to have you here. I've been looking forward to this since we met back at DragonCon. So, all right. So Sonic the Hedgehog came out in 2020. What's your history with Sonic the Hedgehog as a property and sort of the games and all of that? Not because obviously you hadn't seen the movie yet.
Yeah, so let me tell you, Sonic the Hedgehog, probably one of my favorite video game franchises growing up. And as my mom actually found old photos, I used to dress as him as Halloween when I was a kid.
Nice.
So I was very much into the whole Sonic kind of concept, and then obviously the old cartoon series that gave him an attitude, which was really fun and interesting, and the greater lore that ended up going larger and larger and larger to different 3D varieties, and now into the movie, which is like 20 years in the making. I didn't realize until I did a little extra research, kind of switched hands before actually coming forward, but. I mean, the third movie came out. I was like, man, that's really fast. I feel like the first one came out like last year, and then 2020. Oh, okay. I've never seen any of these, and everyone's like, "You haven't seen all these? Like, I thought you were a video game movie guy." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know why I never actually saw this." And then it was 2020, so I understand why I didn't see it.
Right.
So rightfully so, it was like, you know what? Time to dive back in. And obviously, I haven't seen the second or third one, but I've seen various possible spoilers based on what that is, but it seems like they created new lore, but sticking to some of it, which is really great. And I super enjoyed this one a lot. And I watched it with my wife who hasn't seen it, and she was like, every 5 minutes, she's like, "Are you gonna just say like you're gonna point and be like, that thing, or oh that person?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's how this is gonna go. I'm sorry."
That's how it goes with these kinds of movies. So I'm guessing then you were on the Sega side of the Sega Nintendo debate back in the day, or did you kind of not really care either way?
Yeah, so I was young enough, so it's like my older brother and sister. So I only played Sonic 2. I remember when that came out on the Sega Genesis, and I would watch them play it because I was probably like 5 or 6.
Okay.
So I was pretty young on the spectrum. But yeah, we definitely had an NES and then Sega Genesis we jumped to, which was an interesting kind of jump in that. But I was really glad because the whole Sonic series, Sega had some interesting games and franchises before Nintendo bought out the good ones. But yeah, so really Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was like my bread and butter, and I would just play and replay that game over and over and over again, like much of the world has.
Sure. Yeah, I was definitely a Nintendo kid. Legend of Zelda was kind of my main franchise, but I had a Nintendo and Super Nintendo and N64 and all of that. But I had a friend that had a Genesis. We did play a lot of it. And back, it's hard to remember this unless you're old enough, but back in the day, like department stores would have demo units set up that you could go and play these games on. You still see them sometimes at like a GameStop. They'll have a demo running, but you could see these at like Target, right? You just go to the video game section and they'd have like a Genesis set up with a rotating bunch of demos that you could play. And I played more Sonic the Hedgehog at my local Target than probably anywhere else. And it was almost always just Green Hill Zone Act 1 because you just like play it and then the thing would reset and you'd play it again. But that was a lot of my exposure to Sonic, was that before the cartoons.
Yeah, that was good because like those boards are pretty quick once you got through them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it's really easy to go and do a demo. I always remember, obviously, Green Hills is always the big one. The music, the song is just it.
Oh yeah.
always in everyone's mind. And the casino one, I always forget the actual name of that. But when you're literally going in like playing slot machine,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
I'm sitting here, I remember my parents walking in. It's like, what the heck is going on? I'm like, oh yeah, if you get 3 in a row, you get a bunch of rings. I don't know, something made up from this game. And my dad was like, yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Games teaching us about casinos. Um, and I also remember the cartoons. And what was interesting was there were 2 Sonic the Hedgehog cartoons, if you remember. Um, they both had Jaleel White, aka Steve Urkel, as the voice of Sonic, but they were vastly different cartoons. Do you remember
Mhm.
both of those?
I don't know if I remember both of them. I didn't realize they were both. I'm trying to think. Like, did I happen to watch like both of them simultaneously and not really quite understand the difference of them?
It's possible because I know they ran around the same time, but like there was a Sonic the Hedgehog that was extremely ridiculous out there, like Tex Avery, Chuck Jones style goofiness, and like
Yeah, and even the animation was pretty goofy.
yeah,
And I
the
just thought that was just
animation was
straight up
pretty goofy.
Sonic the Hedgehog. Now I'm
Mhm.
thinking about it.
Yeah, and like Robotnik is in it, but he's very crazy and like very over the top, very cartoonish. And then there was
Mhm.
another series of Sonic the Hedgehog that was very like darker and had much more of a story behind it. And like Robotnik in that, I remember him being scary. Uh,
Oh wow, huh?
like he was just more sinister in it. Like Jim Cummings did his voice, and it was just more sinister and like it dealt more with. There was like a plot actually going on instead of just sort of random
Mhm.
adventures. And I always
Okay.
found that interesting. There were the 2 different ones that basically ran at the same time. Um, So this movie comes out in 2020, and I actually saw this is the only one of the 3 I've seen so far. But I saw this in the theater. It was right before everything locked down because of COVID.
Mm.
Because this released January or February 14th, 2020, and I just remember
Oh,
going
just
on a
beat it.
yeah, just beat it. And I remember going on just a random Saturday. I think it was either the first or second weekend. Being a lone adult in a sea full of it was like a Saturday afternoon, so it was just full of kids.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I was like, yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog, why not? I like the games, it was
Yeah.
always fun, and I remember the cartoon, so I went and saw it, and I had a blast. I just remember really, really having a good time with this movie.
And it's always interesting. So it's like I don't have the exact stats, but obviously this was before Mario. But it ended up being a record breaking for video game
Hmm.
movies as a franchise. It's like okay, yeah, this is interesting. And I know there was all of that, and maybe you had this pin to talk about, but the whole drama on the hey, release the trailer with what Sonic looks like, and everyone goes, wait,
Yeah,
no, that's not right. And whether or not that was real or fake, it seemed fairly real since they they held release for at least 3 months or something like that.
something like that. It was supposed to come out late 2019. They bumped it
Mm,
back to February of 2020, and yeah, I remember that trailer coming out and thinking to myself, it's not a great design, but I didn't hate it
mhm,
initially. But I was like, that just it doesn't feel like Sonic. And I get what they were going for, and I saw some stuff and interviews and whatnot with like creative directors and director of the film, and they were trying to bridge that gap between a video game world and the real world, and they were doing this mix of obviously Sonic as a CG character, but taking place on Earth in our world. That was the story they wanted to tell.
mhm.
They definitely did pull both their hamstrings backing away from that initial design of Sonic. And changing it, and it was for the better. This is one of those times I will often say like I hate movies going in front of test audiences, and because a lot of times the stuff that those test audiences say makes changes, and then you're like, why would you change that? It doesn't make any sense to me. This is
Mhm.
one where the backlash actually made sense. I think it was the right change to make.
Yeah, I get the role of wanting to kind of be a little more reality, but especially with how goofy the character,
Mhm.
because theoretically you built the film, so you know what the script is. You weren't making a grounded Sonic. It's still, it's still Ben Schwartz being goofy. So
Yeah.
it's like I think that was right. But I remember seeing that going like, what the heck? And then all of a sudden it blasted and ended up being the second highest rate. I remember this part. It was the second highest grossing film of 2020, but it was 2020. So,
Right.
but like that, great for a video game. But I remember I'm thinking like, man, that would have been a really good like publicity stunt to say, oh, here's the look of what Sonic is. get backlash. No, oh, just kidding. This is what we're going to do. And then all of a sudden people
Yeah.
want to go see it. But that was my only real remembrance of that. And then it kind of came out, it kind of went. And then I just felt like the sequels just kind of rapid fired came out. And I guess once you have it set and the cast wants to do it, then you keep them coming. But I'm with you. I really enjoyed this. Like it had a lot of emotional tug too about like, like the similar plot line of just like trying to find yourself in a new world.
Yeah.
It just always hits me hard, especially someone who's alone, who finds friendship and someone else who's also trying to do something different. It's just a simple plot line that really worked in a world that Sonic was kind of in its own kind of universe. So they said, well, look, we're going to bring you over here.
Yeah. And that makes sense, right? Take your crazy character and put it in a situation that people are going to understand and be able to relate to in some way. And that when your character is so out there and outlandish, you have to do something to ground them, to bring in a movie audience, because the story, obviously, early versions of Sonic the Hedgehog plot was fairly thin. It was basically blue hedgehog collecting chaos emeralds and rings, and there you go. Like early video games didn't need a lot of story, right? Super Mario Brothers, I mean, there's always discourse around like the 1993 movie and how bad that was for Super Mario Brothers. But think about what plot and storyline we had at that point in the Mario Brothers franchise. It wasn't a whole lot unless you read the manuals for those games to know what all those characters were. It was just some dude running and jumping on things. That was the story. So
I love that movie.
Mhm.
Wrong show. I'm gonna go ahead and just pivot real quick. That's the first time I was like, oh, they're the Mario Brothers, Mario, and Luigi Mario.
Yeah. But yeah, like so taking Sonic and making the story take place on Earth gives you, as a movie audience, something to latch onto and work with. There are a couple of story points I'll bring up in a little bit that I thought didn't maybe need to be there, but overall it is a very simple plot of Sonic is told at a young age he's got this power and he needs to keep it secret and he has to run if anything happens. And given what happens to him as a child, it makes sense that that's like ingrained in him. But he's spent so much time now where he is that he likes it, so he doesn't want to run. But he doesn't really have a choice. Coupled with Tom, played by James Marsden, who is the classic tropey, like small town guy that wants to make more of himself, wants to be something bigger, and finds that thing that he's looking for in Sonic and in this friendship that he makes in this situation that he gets forced into. So it's like that simple tropey plot, and that works because our characters are interesting.
Yeah. And especially when you're bringing in, this and any other grounded show, it's like, okay, well, this is something we've already seen before. But then we're gonna take this plot, introducing Sonic the Hedgehog. Like if you said that before you saw the movie, be like, I'm curious now. Let's
Right,
see what happens.
exactly.
I always love like these live action, like kind of animated shows where it's like James Martin, like you are trying to act in front of some sort of, I'm guessing Ben Schwartz and some sort of motion capture thingy, and it's like you're still performing really, really well. And then it's like there's some of the dramatic moments really work out, and you're talking to a CGI hedgehog. It's still like,
Yeah.
how am I tearing up when he's like, I just want a friend. It's like I'm crying real tears over here. And it's like, okay, well that's a good part of hey, we're taking this plot line that everyone kind of recognizes already. And that's a really good point. You're introducing this character that we all know, not similar to that, and putting it in.
Yeah.
One thing I will add, I'm always a big fan, and I know it's kind of overdone, but it starts with Sonic the Hedgehog running away from Dr. Robotnik,
Yes.
and he's like, hey, I bet you're wondering how I got here. I'm always a big fan of like, let's have a narrator sequence that starts at the apex of the movie, and then let's talk backwards, because then you have that narrator sense that makes sense with any kind of montages that go on. But it also kind of works with his character of like, hey, I know what's happening here, and let's take time to pause, bring you up to speed, and figure out what the heck's going on here. But another trope that really worked for this film.
And also, this film is aimed at kids. It's a PG rated movie. Its core audience is going to be young kids and then fans of the video game series. But the core audience is the young kids. That's what they want to get in the theater and take their, the parents, you and I that grew up with the games, take our kids to see it. So they got to aim it at them. And that tropey opening, it was like my second note while watching it this time around. I was like, the trope of the record scratch. You're probably wondering how I got here. I like it. It works, and it's an accessible framing device to then, okay, now we'll give you our origin story, our background to lead us up to this point. It's perfectly fine. I had no problem with that. And also, it's a testament to it's the Muppet effect, right? The idea that James Marsden and Tika Sumpter and everybody, Jim Carrey, everybody that's in this that interacts with Sonic treats that character like he's really there in front of them. It's Michael Caine in the Muppet Christmas Carol, where he is playing it straight up like Shakespearean stage play, while he's surrounded by Muppets. But he treats them all like they're right there, and that's what makes the Muppets work. That's what makes something like this work when you're mixing animation and live action. It's what makes, like, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Why did that work? Because of the way Eddie Valiant and Roger interacted, right? And so I don't think, from what I read, Ben Schwartz wasn't on set a lot.
Okay.
What they used for the stand-ins were, dolls and puppets and like that kind of thing.
Even
But
better.
they
Oh,
wanted
man.
they had to have everything scaled, right? Because obviously Sonic is only a couple feet tall. But they were constantly making sure that like eye lines and everything were correct, and wherever Tom was looking had to be right for the performance. And that's the really important thing. And then on top of that, you cast Jim Carrey and just let him go ham.
Yeah. Jim Carrey doing a role that I think he absolutely loves. Not just in this, but it's like, hey, you're gonna go do here. You're doing the Riddler, but you're gonna do it with Sonic and make it PG. Okay, sounds good to me.
And at that point in his career too, like he had taken a step away from movies for a little while. He hadn't done a whole lot. And I think, if I'm correct, I don't think he had done a movie since Kick-Ass 2.
Oh, that's actually fascinating. And I
I
remember that
think.
I don't know if there were, I'm not gonna say the word regrets, but he definitely had some holdbacks
Trepidation
on it.
behind it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
And so for him, like, this was one, I guess his daughter was a fan of the games and he decided to go for it. And they really let him experiment and go wild. Like, they would apparently just tell him things like, okay, this is the place you're going to be. You're going to be dancing in here. Like, Robotnik is dancing around, go for it. And he would just play with it and have fun.
Yep.
And my first watch of it, he was the best thing in it, is Robotnik and Jim Carrey's performance, because he just is chewing up all of the scenery and loving every second of it. And you can tell he wants to be there. And this watch, I still loved him, but I also much more appreciated Tom, James Marsden's character, and Sonic and their interactions. I liked it the first time. It was good, but it wasn't as memorable. This time, though, I felt the heart in that a lot more.
Yeah. Jim Carrey really took the whole smartest person in the room thing and turned it to 11. A lot of just the way he talked to people around him was just, I'm already thinking 3 steps ahead of you.
Yeah.
And then obviously he gets the quill and then he's like, maybe I can get to those speeds, trying to figure out like what this alien creature is. But kind of fitting right into just, that's what Dr. Robotnik is as a character based on what we know from the show and from the movie, or from the games. You're right. I enjoyed it. The dancing scene was incredible, being, record being stopped by Stone for the latte. He's like, of course I want a latte. You do it perfectly.
Oh, yes.
Just loving the dancing. And from what I understand, based on just, spoilers, apparently that's thematic through the other sequels as well. He's like, I'm going to have a dancing scene. That's just how it's going to be.
And you know what? I'm here for it. Like, I love a movie that has fun. I talked a couple weeks ago about Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. And one of my favorite things about that is that movie is just pure joy, start to finish. And this movie has that same feel for me. It's that fun nature. Ben Schwartz is going for it with Sonic. Sonic is hyperactive, yet never crosses over into the overly grating moment. Like, he never becomes too much. He's sort of like Jar Jar Binks as a character in a vacuum isn't terrible, but there was too much of him in episode 1, and they just let it go a little longer maybe than it needed to, is in my opinion at the time. That's kind of how I felt, was like, I don't hate Jar Jar, but maybe 20% less of Jar Jar. Sonic obviously can't do that because he is your main character, but he never does. He never strays too far. He continues to be likable, and he's just that hyperactive kid. that just has to be into everything. Like I love the scene where they pull up at the rest stop or whatever, and there's the Piston Pit bar, and him in the truck, like trying so hard not to go inside.
Yep.
Because
he's still like a little kid when, even though he's grown as an adult, he's like, watching movies with people who don't know. He's saying, I have these friends and they don't know he exists except for Crazy Carl. But when he goes to the Piston Pit, he's like, oh man, they're having fun. I want to have fun. I just want to have fun, knowing very well, like, I'm going to be leaving here shortly.
Yeah.
So, obviously much to Tom's chagrin, he goes in there, which let's talk about this. He's a cop and he's going to go to a payphone when he knows the government's after him.
Right.
Come on, man. Come on.
Well, small town sheriff, right? I mean, at least he's smarter than his deputy, Wade.
That's true. Which I will say, another aha moment. I was like, Adam Pally from for Happy Endings. That's what you've been up to, buddy. Sorry, that's the show that I used to watch growing up, a few years back. And I was like, that's him, and he's playing the same character that he does in that show. So
apparently,
my wife and I had a fun thing like that.
Nice. He had auditioned to be Tom, and that would have been interesting. There was also in 2018 a report that Paul Rudd was in the running to play Tom, which I could see that. That is one, if that is true, if they did look at him at one point, I could see Paul Rudd in this kind of movie. Even in 2020, like in the last couple of years, we've seen him in a ton more, but he definitely could have fit that role.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Paul Rudd's probably a little old, but he still looks like he's 32. So
oh yeah.
Also, so the Piston Pit was a lot of fun.
It was.
Yeah.
Just some other names that, because I love IMDb trivia of these actors where, because like if you go and you look at any movie from the 1980s that was an action movie, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sly Stallone were, are listed as potentially would have been in this movie. Like most of the time they're not. But I always love these because it's curious to think about. So we had James Marsden, who was really good. I like him in this. I think he fits it right. He's got just enough of the aw shucks to believably be from a small town like that, while still being able to step up and like not feel like he's out of place when things really go sideways and he has to do something. So I liked that. But here's some other names that were potentially were considered for the role of Tom. Chris Pratt, Chris Evans.
Okay.
So you got two of the Chris's. Paul Rudd.
Wow.
Jake Johnson.
I
could see Jake Johnson.
Jake Johnson would be fun in that, yeah.
I actually kind of really want to see the version with Michael B. Jordan as Tom.
Ooh.
That could be really interesting.
Yeah.
Bill Hader. Okay. I like Bill. Bill would have been a lot of fun.
I feel like that would have been a stylistic pivot that would still work with the script, but it would definitely would have been a slight change in what the character of Tom was portrayed in this version.
Jason Segel. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe. Justin Timberlake. I don't love it. Adam Pally, as we mentioned. Ansel Elgort. And Milo, or Milo. I think it's Milo. Ventimiglia.
Oh,
he would have been an interesting one too. So yeah,
real Gilmore Girls friends would know.
Yeah. So I think overall they made the right choice. I think James Marsden was a good choice for this because end of the day, if you have Jim Carrey going at a 12 over here and you've got Sonic who is bouncing off the walls and going crazy, you need something very centered. Like I like Bill Hader, but Bill Hader would almost be leaning too far in one direction, in the same direction as a Jim Carrey. For me, I don't hate it, but it would be interesting. Michael B. Jordan, I think, would have been really, really interesting to see, and Jake Johnson, I think, also could have been a lot of fun. But I do think Marsden was a great choice, and he's having fun. You can tell.
Yeah. That's fascinating seeing that list, just kind of how that casting list could go. Because you can almost see 2 or 3 different versions of this movie based on the performances of what Tom is.
Yeah.
I wonder if that would also change like what, Ben Short Sonic does. That's fun. I mean, Bill, because this is kind of like before he kind of pivoted to do Barry, which is a very different show. So it'd be interesting. James Marsden was great, and like I was a huge fan of Westworld, so
Mhm.
I kind of liked him, like kind of felt him kind of being like the yeah, kooky main character who, can also hold himself in a fight.
Yep.
It would also make sense for that, I'm a Montana small town cop who probably has to deal with a lot of bar fights or whatever.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, I like that. And I like Tom's story, right? Because Tom is your everyman. He's the local sheriff. And it's that whole idea of I live in this small town and I want more. I feel like
Mhm.
I should be doing more. I want to help people more. Kind of you don't realize what you have right in front of you type of thing. But
Yeah, especially when it's like you kind of later. It's kind of a throwaway line that I wish they expanded on a little bit. But it's like, your father was, you come with a family of people who have lived here and have protected the city,
Mhm.
and it's like, oh, okay, that's interesting, and that creates a layer that's so much hard. Because at first, like, oh yeah, I get he wants to leave. Oh, that is something that would create some tension based on you wanting to leave. And
yeah,
also, everybody knows who he is, calls for him to help, and it seems like he does every little chore if somebody calls and asks him. Hey, who do I call for this? Hey, can you help me with the
yeah,
cow? Or can you help me do this? Well, I think when he goes into the portal and comes out in the farmer asks him, hey, can you help deliver a baby calf? It's like, what? Okay, sure.
yeah, yep. Because he's the sheriff. His wife is the town vet.
Mm,
And what I think too, it gives it that layer of like, not only is there the tension of him wanting to leave, but it also gives a reason why he would want to, right? Because his family has been there for so long, and you get that whole thing of like, yeah, but there's more world out there, and I want to go explore that. And so it's the push and pull of like, do I do that or not?
mhm,
The grass is greener over there, and it takes somebody like Sonic who doesn't have friends, who doesn't have that connection to anyone
mhm,
that Tom has and takes for granted that he has that connection. And Sonic is the one to show him that. And on top of that, I like that his wife Maddie is incredibly supportive of him in that idea. She knows,
mhm.
like, that Maddie is smart enough to realize this is the best place for us to be, but she can't force that. And if Tom really does want to go, and that's the really important thing to him, she's going to follow him in that because he followed
Mhm.
her in becoming a vet. So, like, their relationship, I really like in this movie. It's not explored very deep and I think if this were a movie, aimed at a more adult audience and not aimed at kids, they would have had a little bit more of that. But I liked
Mhm.
what we got in their relationship, so that was cool.
Yeah, it's funny because most of their entire relationship and give and take, not much tension. They're very supportive of each other, even in the whole "Hey, I'm bringing an unconscious Sonic, help me."
Right.
She's like, "You know what? I'm cool with this. I'm just gonna yes and my way through it."
Hmm.
But then her sister is very much like, "He's terrible. Divorce him." Like, but there's like not a single reason. But I think that's kind of part of the hilarity of it,
Hmm.
or is like, well, they've had zero conflict that we've seen. So what do you think? Even when he's like on the news being a domestic terrorist potentially, um you're super supportive, so it's like you're
Yeah.
right about that. There was no need to explore it really, and because it's really aimed for a younger audience, it's like we don't need to do that. So
Yeah,
and
because
that
that's
worked
just
out,
going to
and honestly
sail.
I kind of like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, any of that's going to sail over their heads for the young audience at this point. So instead, give us the sitcom version of like, yeah, but his sister-in-law hates him, right? Or
Mhm.
it could have
Yep.
been the mother-in-law, whatever. It doesn't matter. Like some in-law doesn't like him. We don't even need a reason why. They just don't.
Yeah.
So I loved all of that. Like I just loved the interpersonal relationships in this because Sonic and Tom really do they get a natural friendship out of it. There's one thing with their arc that I don't like, and it's only because it just felt like it got put in there for no reason and we really didn't need it. And that is during the scene where they're driving and we have the whole highway chase
Hmm.
sequence, which is great. It's a really good action sequence. Um, but the tension between Tom and Sonic there, where Sonic is telling him, "Well, you could just ditch me. That's what you're good at," type of thing. I didn't love that because that felt like it
Yeah.
came on quickly and was a little bit forced. But I also sort of get it because at the same time, Sonic is still effectively a kid, and he's going to
Hmm.
swing back and forth really far.
Yeah, and I could see it's like, oh hey, look, there might be, because he kind of addresses it later. I'm trying to think of like where it kind of lines up, but he does mention in that argument later on, you're leaving the most perfect, and to Sonic, this is the perfect place because he's living here. He hasn't had any issues. He's grown up pretty much raising himself in this beautiful place. There's not a lot of people. Doesn't have to worry.
Yeah.
And he I think says something along the lines of, you're leaving this perfect place willingly, and I am forced to leave, as a situation of like, I'm being angry at my situation, and then you're going to go ahead and leave, not realizing that like, well, I'm technically going to be out of the story, or out of the situation here anyway.
Yeah.
But I think those lines specifically kind of then lead to possibly, hey, maybe I do need to stay here afterwards when all the conflict ends up.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of with you, especially like the first initial, okay, just go west. And then if you just look, you draw a line west from wherever in Montana, you hit the ocean. That was funny. But then you're right about afterwards. But we just went through this giant battle and almost died, or almost got, taken. And now we're going to go ahead and do this part. I'm kind of with you there.
But it's a minor gripe. Like, it also makes sense in the type of movie that they're making. So it's something I wanted to point out, because I just felt like, we didn't need like those lines. They could have gotten through the sequence without them. And it doesn't change anything. But overall, like the dynamic between Sonic and Tom was really organic. It felt real, like they meet, and of course Sonic knows Tom, or at least knows him from afar. So he feels like they're already friends. In his mind they are. Tom doesn't, but they slowly, over time, he kind of realizes like, this kid isn't so bad. He could be a good friend.
That kind of makes the whole, when Tom sees him for the first time and accidentally shoots him with the tranquilizer dart, that makes it that much hilarious, because Sonic's like, but I've known you forever and you shot me. And Tom's like, I don't know what this thing is. And this is very weird to see.
It's very good.
And just all of a sudden, it just like, all right, how are we going to create, what's our exposition moving forward that they're going to become a buddy movie? Oh, hey, look, he accidentally puts the ring into the San Francisco and to whatever bank tower, and he drops the rings, and oh shoot, now they're gone. He's tranquilized. It's like, oh, okay, that's how we go on this giant road trip, which makes it even funny, because a road trip story is always hilarious. But it's just like, you see that dichotomy between like, Sonic thinks they're best friends, and you shot me, and he's like, I don't know what the heck you are.
And I liked how the rings, because I remember there being teleport rings or something in the Sonic games, but for whatever reason, because I didn't play a ton of them, I mostly think of them as just like, they're the thing he has to collect. So I liked how in the movie they made them a MacGuffin that he uses. There's a use to them. But I also liked that it was whatever he was thinking about at the time is where they would go. So the fact that they end up in San Francisco is just because he sees the T-shirt after getting shot with the tranq dart. Like, it's pretty good.
And it happens to be that same bank, the same bank on the shirt, which just a fun use case for the exposition. But what I also did enjoy is, like, for those who haven't played the games, the rings are also your life source. If you have 0 rings and you get hit, you die. So you have to have rings, and the more that you get, the better, because if you get hit, they bounce everywhere, and you can go grab them to help kind of get another life, not life, but like HP essentially.
Yeah.
So even though that's not what these were doing, every time he would get hit, he'd drop them and they'd go everywhere. Yes. So like that was, and they'd make the same kind of sound effect. So that was still kind of like that's kind of a fun little Easter egg about how that was working. But yeah, as teleportation goes, the lore of Sonic gets really weird and intricate. And like you mentioned Chaos Emeralds, and it's like, I don't really remember. You collect them, and then it's like, yay, you saved all the animals. Then they go away again, and next game, collect them. And so it's like, I'm not entirely sure if like the rings and the teleportation were ever, put together in so many words, as much as it's circular. So, hey, that can also be our portal.
Yeah. The mushroom world, that was a world in Sonic, right?
So
is that one of the zones, or is that just a dig at Super Mario Brothers? Because it feels like that.
I kept trying to think, I don't remember it being a world proper outside of like an area that had mushrooms. Maybe like there was like a swampy area, but never anything that looked like that. But the whole like, I hate mushrooms reminded me so much of Mario. I was like, okay, we're doing an extended universe, I guess. But it's just like really funny how he did mention that. But I it's probably a little bit of both. It probably and I didn't watch all of the TV, so I'm not sure the TV shows. I'm not sure if this planet was ever brought up, or if it was just an easy way to be like, here's a uninhabited planet, And okay, mushrooms are easy to get mad at. So there
Yeah,
you go. I like to think it's a Mario thing.
I do too. That's in my head canon. It is. It's just them making fun of Mario. Um, so I loved. This is a well written movie in terms of like setup and giving us things to look forward to. Like we pay a lot of attention to Sonic's shoes early in it. We get a lot of shots of his shoes as he's running around, and you notice that they're two different shoes and they're really beat up. And that was one of the things is Sonic in the games, his design, he's got those red shoes.
hmm
And
Red shoes,
so,
white buckle, or strap, or whatever.
yeah, and I liked because sometimes getting a character to their standard look can feel tropey and forced, and you could make an argument that they did that here, but I kind of like the way that they did it here, which is
Yeah,
he
and
collects things and he runs all the time, so of course he's going to run right through his shoes.
mhm.
But he's always collecting stuff, so it makes sense he's got multiple different shoes and all that. And then to have the little girl Jojo, be the one to give him his shoes, I thought was really cute.
Yeah, and he mentioned like that's the first time he's ever received a gift, and it's like the
Hmm.
iconic shoes. And I look back, I was like, I don't remember this, but why didn't like Nike or Adidas or Reebok or any pick a shoe company
Right?
jump in on this and do Sonic shoes? Like the minute she brought them out, I was like, oh, these are going to be like straight up Nikes, aren't they? And then they were very nondescript for a very specific reason.
In a
But that just
movie,
fascinated me. Like in this
right?
world, it's like you would think that, oh, hey, look, we're going to do an iconic shoe shot. That someone would be like, yeah, here's money. Put our logo on it.
Well,
But it
not
didn't
only
happen. So
that, but in a movie full of already some silly product placement to begin with, like
Mhm.
the Zillow reference out of nowhere. They have
Oh
to
yeah, that was
mention,
funny.
"Oh, I'm looking at apartments on Zillow." Like, okay, that one seemed silly. Or Mellow Yellow was another one. I like that.
Oh
Get him a
yeah.
Mellow Yellow. And I have an audio clip I will play about Olive Garden, but like Olive Garden getting brought up too multiple times. And
Yeah.
yet, the one place where the product placement should have worked the most, they didn't do it.
Yeah. Even like I was watching, my wife was like, "Okay, so what kind of shoe is that? Like a shoe?" And I'm like, "It just looks like a regular running shoe. Missed opportunity, I guess. I guess no
Absolutely.
free ads. Maybe nobody wanted to."
Yeah. No, it should have been. I mean, Nike should have been all over that. Those and
Yeah.
tell you what, you'd have sold a lot of that running shoe if you called them the Sonic, the Nike Air Sonic or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And then especially we kind of went over this part of a movie, but like when he watched the baseball game and he
mhm.
played baseball. There is a baseball Sonic game, so that makes
Yep.
sense. But it's like you could have done like, oh, get the baseball, the Sonic bat, and then you can, whatever. And in any way, shape, or form, it was just like, wow, the shoe that seems really like for Space Jam. They did that whole,
Yeah.
they went out for that. It's like kind of a missed opportunity, but
Crazy.
if no one wants to write you a check, then no free ads, right?
Yeah. Um, so this movie does do and if you have a speedster in your movie, you're doing this now. I don't want to say Days of Future Past, X-Men Days of Future Past was the first movie to do this type of scene, but I
Mhm.
feel like it was one of the first to really do this type of a scene, which is that super speed character is moving so fast that everyone else is effectively frozen in space and they run around moving stuff. And then it all, uh, after everything happens, um, then the scene ends with all of it happening at once. Like clearly that was inspired by that scene in Days of Future Past. I feel like there's
Mhm.
no way around that because that was like 2014, I think is when that movie came out. So 4 or 5 years
Yeah, it's
before
got
they
it.
were filming.
And I mean, I was a huge this is a whole separate thing, but I was a huge CW Arrowverse fan, so that
Yep.
happened a lot in the Flash series. I
Hmm.
even wrote a note when I was watching. It's like big fan of a Speed Force slowdown bit,
Yep.
like
Oh, I am too.
because you can do so much with it, where you just kind of like turn on. It's like, okay, I mean, in this, obviously not Speed Force, but it's like that's literally like, hey, I'm in the Speed Force and I'm gonna go do shenanigans. Tie these guys up with tissue paper. I'm gonna move Tom out of the way, and I'm
Yep.
gonna make it so that in 2 seconds everyone's gonna be defeated in this bar fight, and then
Yep.
check it off my list. But they did a really good job, and they did it a couple different times in the movie too.
Yeah, and it looked really good. Like, and that is the
Mhm.
thing. This movie's effects fantastic. Like we talked about the design of Sonic and the change they made to that worked because my biggest issue with the first design of Sonic in that initial trailer was his eyes were too small and you need a character like him to have big expressive eyes.
Mhm.
So they
His
did
eyes
that.
always look like goggles to me
Yeah.
too. Like always
Oh,
was
definitely.
part of that. Doing that with like the little tiny nose. It was very odd
Mhm.
for the change they did based on what his actual character looks like. But
Yeah.
yeah, and just him having that expression, just kind of like smiling his way through it as he's going through his bar fight, like they don't even know. Um,
But then,
it
I
just
mean,
it well done, yeah.
yeah, all the effects, like there's very few shots of where I'm like, yeah, that doesn't look like it composited very well. And like Sonic is clearly a CG character, and we know that from the beginning, but he is so well integrated into everything
Mhm.
throughout the movie. And then those super speed sequences are just they're so well done. Like I put them visually on the level of those X-Men sequences, and those are some of the best that I've ever seen. Are those Quicksilver sequences in those X-Men movies? And this is right on
Yeah.
that level. Like they look that good, and plus you get all your there's little Easter eggs in that when he's running around, like chowing down on the chili dogs.
Yep.
Was great. Like I loved that. So it was just super super fun.
Yep.
Um,
Ate
I
a
did.
thing called a chili dog, which again, part of the Sonic lore is that he
Yeah.
eats chili dogs, which is very strange. But
So-
yeah, I enjoyed that, and just like watching that all culminate. The one thing about that bar scene that still was like, whatever. I'm a big, I can suspend my disbelief a bit. But he tries to be all concealed first, like, hey, I'm
Mhm.
just gonna do while I'm sitting on the bar, and then he goes, oh, my friend has a little something to where his face is all blue. And then like at in the middle of like the big bar thug coming to him and saying like, I don't like, whatever, I don't like your kind. He's like, what do you mean you're kind? Then all of a sudden he just takes off everything, and there's no surprise about like,
Yeah.
oh, you're like a 3'7" hedgehog. We're just gonna go into bar fight mode. And I'm like, but you just tried so hard to whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't matter. Um,
Yeah.
and I loved the moment where Tom is lamenting like being from the small town, and they call me to fix a flat tire or jumpstart their car or whatever, and Sonic's response to it is perfect. It's, yeah, but they call you. And there's that moment, and Tom's like,
Mhm.
crap, they do call me. Like that's the first turn in him
It's like
of maybe this
you-
isn't
you're
so
wa-
bad after all.
yeah, you're wanted or needed, and
Hmm.
it's Um, and this is just kind of he always kind of goes back as this kind of core moment. Even after the baseball scene I thought that was really cool. That speed scene where he's pitching to himself, batting to
Hmm.
himself, he's fielding for himself. That was really cool.
Oh yeah.
And then he tries to celebrate and he just goes, I really am alone. And just like, that is kind of like Sonic's core motivation throughout all of it, is like, he's going from I'm alone to I'm not alone. So it's like
Yeah.
hearing Tom complain about like I'm always needed or whatever, I want to do something bigger. It's like, but you're needed and you're wanted and you have
Yeah.
friends and family who love you. Like you could go to a new place like I did and not know anything and not know how to, move on. Like
Yeah.
it was
And
kind of a neat, because that's not necessarily a Sonic trope as much as it was in this, because they put him into, Earth.
yeah. Well, and it's sometimes you need that other perspective. You need somebody from a different angle to kind of knock you into place and be like, "Oh no, okay, this makes sense." Now I captured some audio from this because I love good audio clips, and there's a lot here. I'm going to start with because I found it hilarious. After Sonic is playing the baseball by himself, and he has his little freak out moment, and this is the first time where we see him. His emotions and his stress level cause his like supersonic or whatever that is, where he gets all amped up and then he has like the EMP burst.
Mm-hmm.
We cut to the Pentagon, and this scene in the Pentagon was killing me because you get first this.
20 minutes ago, an energy surge knocked out power across the entire Pacific Northwest. What do we know?
Well, our first instinct was it was an EMP. But electromagnetic pulses don't have that kind of power.
NASA has ruled out meteor strikes or solar flares.
The Department of Energy says it's not a power plant malfunction.
Well, sounds like we're really good at figuring out what it wasn't.
It's true.
Good line.
Yeah, they really don't know what it wasn't. And then because it's our backdoor introduction to Robotnik, I love the trope of starting to talk about somebody without saying a name, and everybody in the room knows who they're talking about and does not like that at all, because he's like talking about, yeah, do you remember the coup and wherever? No, of course not. Or
Or the uprising in Azerbaijanistan.
It's not even a country.
Exactly.
Like, it's so silly, and I loved it. I also loved
I know, he's a little weird.
Weird.
No.
the reaction from that one guy, like the naval officer, when he's just
Weird.
there's a way. So good. It's just really good. And then the very classic trope of we don't have a choice. And it's just,
And you can thank Robotnik for that.
I can't believe you're bringing that freak into this.
Neither can I. But we have no choice.
and they're playing that so earnestly. And like, it's so ridiculous. The whole scene is, and the fact that they're playing it straight the way that they are is what kills me. It's what makes it work.
Yeah. And then when you're introduced to him and how he reacts to everybody, and even like that first scene when he goes to the baseball field and he's like, "Who's in charge here?" And he's like, "Wrong, it's me," or whatever. And he tears that guy down. And he's just playing it straight face. I wonder how many takes that had to take.
Neil McDonough, by the way, playing Major Bennington, who I love Neil McDonough, and if I had a complaint about this movie, it's that his character's in that scene and then we never see him again. And I get it. He doesn't have a point to be there, but I like him as an actor so much. And he does that scene great, but I feel like there was an earlier draft of the script that maybe had him in it more. And that's why you would cast somebody of his level. But yeah, like everything with Robotnik was great, which we will be getting to Robotnik because Jim Carrey, oh boy. But first, Tom had some great moments, and there's a couple with Maddie in here as well. But I love that Sonic has names for everybody. And he calls Tom the Donut Lord. And it's a silly name, and it's funny because he's a cop. But then when you see him talking to the donut, and I just loved it.
What do you think, Sergeant Sprinkles?
When you start giving your donuts names, maybe you've been out there for too long. Maybe.
Especially when he tells the donut, "Hey, I'm going to be leaving for San Francisco. What are you doing?"
Also,
Donut Lord.
I'm pretty sure that I know Jim Carrey had a lot of ad-libbing going on. I really hope that the moment when we are introduced to Tom and he's sitting at the speed trap with the radar gun and he's like zooming back and forth with it and he hits himself in the face at one point, I really hope that was just an outtake that they left in. Like he didn't intend, that wasn't a scripted thing. He just accidentally hit himself, ran with it, and then they cut and they were like, "We're keeping that one in the movie," because that one was just perfect.
Yep.
So when he meets Sonic for the first time, well, first when he gets home, he sees,
Get out of there, you trash pandas.
every time Trash Panda's said, I'm going to capture it. It's too good.
Which now that you mentioned that Chris Pratt was a possible Tom,
Yeah,
makes
exactly.
that much more hilarious.
It really does. But he finally meets Sonic, accidentally shoots him with the tranq dart, which I love that exchange when he's talking to his wife on the phone. And she's like, "Do not use my tranquilizer gun on those raccoons. That's meant for bears." He goes, "Good. Maybe it'll work." Like,
That's why you should divorce him.
yeah. But then he's talking to Sonic for the first time. And his reactions to things were perfect in that it's a weird situation. He doesn't know what to do, and yet he's not completely in shock, freaking out. But like,
hopefully I'm going to wake up in a hospital bed, and the doctor's going to tell me that my colonoscopy was a big success. Okay, so goodbye.
the okay, so goodbye is the perfect part of that. And
that's when I went like, okay, so he's like 40 or 45.
Yep. And then these, going back and forth with Sonic, the chemistry between Marsden and Schwartz and the voice work, which is why, you mentioned earlier about Ben Schwartz being in like a mocap suit or something. I would have bought that based on the way that their interactions were. Like, it's a testament to Ben Schwartz and his voice work, voice acting, to have that kind of chemistry with somebody when you're not on set with them. But I loved these exchanges.
You're not here to abduct me, are you?
You abducted me.
Okay, that's a fair point.
It's so good, but then to back that up with,
Why do you keep calling me Donut Lord?
Because you talk to donuts and then eat them if they get out of line.
Again, fair.
He's like, oh, you're smart too. Shit. Shoot.
That's the best part. And then you eat them when they get out of line.
Yeah.
Because he
that's
does
too
treat
funny.
his donuts like little people. It's so good. Like something that we don't see, but you don't need to see it to know how ridiculous it is. Because we see one thing with the Sergeant Sprinkles, and that's it. But then to have Sonic be saying like a line like that just fills in so much more. It's great.
Because that's what you can do with donuts. You're not throwing them away.
Right.
There's a bit where, and I'm not sure if you'll go this when they're in the elevator going up to the tower, and he's got a bag with Sonic in it, and he's up there with somebody else. And they're like, "Is there a kid in there?" No, it's not a kid. It's like, hopefully it's like, well, this is the first time you've had to be in a tight quarters. It's like, well, this is at least better than the dog cage.
Yeah.
Just like the eyes popping of the other person in the elevator, like, you're putting what's going on over there?
Yeah, that was I did capture that. That was this one.
Do you have your child in that bag?
No. I mean, yes, it's a child, but it's not mine.
No, it's okay. I'm a cop.
Yeah.
The blatant product placement of
The only apps on my phone are the ones that came with it. In the Olive Garden.
Ah, because when you're there.
Your family.
so bad. So bad.
Have you seen the Never-Ending Pasta Bowl? It's delicious.
The fact that they made a callback to that at the end of the movie with the gift card is perfect.
Yep.
Absolutely perfect. I also love Maddie when she sees him carrying a giant blue hedgehog for whatever reason. Like you said, totally rolls with it. She just yes hands her way through it. But I like she's got the first aid kit, and he's like, smelling salts.
No, they don't make cat smelling salts.
They should.
They should.
The cat with the zoomies, like, already? Come on.
Yeah.
Just that little, just like, and okay, we're gonna skip right over that. They're for humans.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then he gets the zoomies.
I also really liked this just because this is like towing the line of PG to PG-13, and it's perfect. The air brake on the truck, getting the F and what WTF was really good.
Mm-hmm.
Sonic had a couple good moments too. I just liked this from the opening, which I don't remember the owl. Was there an owl character in Sonic, or is that kind of more or less made up for this?
Yeah, so Longbeak is kind of a character in Sonic's universe or world, and like Morbius. Anyway, the way that it was pitched was a little different. It's kind of like a mother-son situation, but yeah, Longbeak is a character and is like the last owl, character.
Okay, because I just liked.
She was basically Obi-Wan Kenobi, if Obi-Wan Kenobi had a beak and ate mice.
That's kind of how it goes. Sonic talking to himself, which I can relate to. I do that a lot. Although he would talk to himself and then answer himself, which was great. But after he lets loose the basically an EMP, which my note was like, yep, nobody's going to notice that. And it was
Okay, everything is fine. You played some baseball, got a little upset, lightning shot out of your butt, and now they're coming for you.
I mean, it happens.
Lightning, yeah. And this the typical, just like the way that Ben Schwartz's delivery is too. It's very classic comedy for him.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of like I do enjoy. It's like a voice actor who's not trying to really hide who they are as a performer as well, and kind of putting a little bit of their nuances in too. And I thought stuff when he talks about that, it was part of it.
Oh yeah. Again, this is a perfect response from Tom to something that Sonic says.
I don't have time to explain, but you have to help me.
No, I don't.
No, I don't.
His reasoning was like, this is crazy. You have to know how crazy this is.
And then they get in the truck, and I just love.
What are you?
I'm a hedgehog. I feel like that's obvious.
Is it though? Is it really obvious?
Just, well, where I come from, echidnas are trying to kill me. What?
Right.
I've never seen one in real life.
This was what I talked about where this just felt a little bit forced, but then the more I think about it, the more I kind of get it, given that Sonic is supposed to be still pretty young.
And if I don't make it, just ditch me. You seem good at that.
Like that feels like a kid lashing out. right?
Mhm.
And so it's still my least favorite thing in the movie, but I get it.
Especially since Tom so far seemed like he's a trustworthy character in that
Yes.
city, in that
Mhm.
town rather,
Yeah.
to where he's never been like you're supposed to kind of be the good cop. So like you seem to be good at that. We feel like you would want some other example of him doing that action.
Yeah.
And if you're saying oh it's the first time where he said get out of my car, it's like I mean okay.
Mhm.
But you're right. If he's still a kid, that's what he's looking at is like, okay, you did this to me once,
Right.
kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And then I know the last one with Sonic was just a really good heartfelt moment.
Sure, they can call anybody, but they don't. They call you.
And he really, I mean, that's so important for him.
Mhm.
Robotnik. I mean, Jim Carrey just having a blast. Like, this is such a good insult or threat to somebody.
Tell him to stop or I'll pull up his search history.
That, and then he pulls out, he drops the Charlotte's Web line and then gets all of his drones out. And I just, again,
Look what came out of my egg sack.
Jim.
Oh, buddy.
Robotnik, come on now. I mean, they're so good.
I don't know if you realize.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Major. What was your name? Benny. Nobody cares.
Just like completely just steps on him the entire way. And he's just sitting there just like, all right, well, I guess
He is the
you're in
perfect
charge
soldier.
now.
Yep. I also loved.
They don't need time off to get drunk and put the boat in the water.
I want to see some of the other takes of some of those lines because I want to know where else Jim Carrey went. Like, it's a PG movie, and you know he knows that going into it. But did he do like a Robin Williams, where because Robin Williams would do on Mork and Mindy, for instance, they wouldn't have it scripted; they would just be like ad lib it, and so he would go off the rails and just be blue as blue can be to the point where they had to like give him prompts to work with so that he could keep it something they could actually play on air on network television.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there was any of that with Jim Carrey in this movie. Like, how far did he go that, you know, talking about getting drunk will get into your kids' movie.
Yeah.
So I also liked him introducing himself.
Mr. Doctor. Dr. Robotnik. But my dentist calls me Rob.
Which I don't even know because canonically his name is Ivo Robotnik, but I don't even know that they said his first name.
Nope, they never did. I do like them calling him Eggman in this, and that and that Sonic is the one that calls him Eggman. I did enjoy that. Marsden and Carey going back and forth, Tom and Robotnik, where it was great. Like,
I was spitting out formulas while you were still spitting up formula.
I was breastfed, actually.
Nice. Rub that in my orphan face.
Just the thing to say.
So good. He is just unhinged in this movie.
Thank you, Officer Brain Fart.
Which is a perfect name for Wade.
Yeah. I do love how Marsden tries to like kind of combat his sassiness, but he just kind of gets taken to a loop about how smart he is to the point where just like, oh, and I punched him in the face twice.
Yeah, it's great. He's got just the right level of snark to really go with it. When Robotnik shows up at the top of the whatever building in San Francisco, I can't remember, something pyramid. And he meets Maddie for the first time. This is just great.
I see you've taken a lover. Does she have a name, or should we just call her Collateral Damage?
Just absolutely crazy. I also, this one, okay.
You're not allowed up there. It's one of the 7 wonders.
It's one of the 7 wonders.
Blast.
Yeah, says the guy who just
pyramid.
just blew up the Sphinx, like without a second thought.
Oh my gosh.
The dance sequence, by the way, if you haven't seen this movie yet, or if you have and you just need to go back and watch that silly dance sequence, in his trailer because it is so good. But then it ends with and followed by probably the best line and certainly the best delivery of any line in this entire movie.
I just thought you might like a latte with steamed Austrian goat milk. What do I look like, an imbecile? Of course I want a latte. I love the way you make them!
Man. I man, that's just one of those things where it's like, that totally had to be improv, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Just like you would think, like, no, you idiot, I'm, doing important work or something. He's like, I love the way you make them with Australian goat milk.
And it's yelling it at him too.
Yep.
It's screaming, I love the way you make them, angrily in his face. It's just perfect. It was just, I have like 3 or 4 different times in my notes, I just have unhinged in all caps because that was Jim Carrey throughout the whole movie. Robotnik is perfect. And then to have the very end sequence where he gets sent through the portal and he ends up in the mushroom planet, whatever that is. So when we cut back to seeing him and now he's got the full on Robotnik look of the huge, ridiculous mustache, and he's shaving his head and he's wearing the flight suit. He isn't as big yet. He's not egg shaped. Mm-hmm. But to have that to set up your sequel is just amazing. Like Jim Carrey, just having way too much fun, and I loved every second of it.
You saying unhinged is perfect for that scene because he is shaving his head with like the shards of metal from his ship and just like completely doing that. Then he does the iconic, puts his goggles like on his forehead, like Robotnik is. Yeah, he's got the comically large mustache, and what he says, like, a normal human would be dead by now. I'll be home by Christmas. It's just, he's not phased whatsoever. He's just going to use that as another challenge. And well, he's going to use it as a challenge. And I mean, to get extremely, extremely, peeved off at Sonic and Friends. But that you're right. Unhinged is the right term. He just, every time a scene came up with him, I was like, okay, what's he going to get into now? What's he going to say now? And just like,
it was
him creating the discovery with the quill and all that. And it's, now I can be as fast as you can. Oh, shoot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, it was great. Couple of Easter eggs that I noticed were, and I'm guessing as a Sonic fan, you probably did, the Sonic tapping his foot waiting moment was great. And the second super speed. Yep. Because I definitely remember that pose a lot. I loved the music overall. Like the music really fit everything, and incorporating some of the Sonic themes, especially like Green Hill Zone, working that in. And I did not know this until after watching it this time. This soundtrack, the composer for this was Tom Holkenborg, aka Junkie XL, who did soundtracks for Deadpool, Mad Max Fury Road.
Okay.
Stuff like that. He is an amazing composer. His soundtracks are unreal how good they are. Like I love the music in Fury Road. And he does some of them under Junkie XL and he does some of them as Tom Holkenborg or Thomas Holkenborg. But yeah, like the music was just a lot of fun and it really fit all of the moments in here too.
Yeah, it was great. And they did the Green Hills theme. I did see that there's a piano version kind of in the last scene that was John Batiste who recorded it.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see more. And I know sometimes this is just it's hard to get the rights in some, easily obtainable manner, but just there was some thematic scene from some of the music from the game, but the game music is so iconic and pretty much just like, Mario, Zelda. It's incredible work that it would have been nice to see. Now I haven't seen 2 or 3, so maybe that's something that's there. But I mean, the whole soundtrack was great. Even when you just find like just the random rock music and the piston pit and all that.
Yeah,
I think they did pretty. That was a good job. And it's like, if you haven't seen this movie, in and out, 90 minutes, if that, maybe a little bit longer. It was just a fun, fast-paced movie. There wasn't a lot of just downtime. It was entertaining from front to back. And that's saying like, I don't have kids, so I didn't watch it with kids. So just as an adult who enjoyed the IP, this was a very fun movie to watch, and it was very quick.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
No, and that's the thing, right? The pacing is such that you don't ever get those moments where everything bogs down. They kept the story moving along just right. Even the the moments where you're getting a little bit more exposition don't drag out. They kept them moving. They kept the plot moving along, which you need. And setting themselves up for a sequel with, as we mentioned, Robotnik. But then also, did you stick around for the after credits moment where
We're gonna
Tails
get some
pops out?
Tails.
So that was a lot of fun too. I really
Yep.
enjoyed that.
And of course, knowing never seeing it, but knowing what is in 2, then you also get Idris Elba as Knuckles.
Yep.
Which I'm very excited for because I've seen, and I'm not sure if this was just a bit, but have seen video of him in the recording studio with the giant Knuckles gloves.
Yes.
Theoretically, to get into character. So I'm looking forward to that. There was some pop culture, as we're just kind of bringing that up. I always love movies like this that bring up pop culture. Then it's like, oh, is this in Universal? Like he's reading Flash comics. So
Yep.
Flash is canonical. Obviously, the Star Wars reference we discussed. But the one that fascinated me, just knowing very much about the third movie, is one of the movies he's watching behind Tom's, as for movie night, was Speed with Keanu Reeves, who he names by name.
Yes.
Who now is voicing Shadow in the third one. And I don't know if I doubt they're going to make a reference, but that to me was like, what?
So I completely forgot about that for when I saw it for the first time. So when I was watching it this time, I was just like gobsmacked by that moment. I'm like, that's so perfect that they name drop Keanu and then they cast him 4 years later. It's amazing. Yeah, this was a lot of fun and like it did well. I mean, when you consider the fact that it was released in February of 2020 and a month later, everything shuts down. The movie still made $150 million in the U.S. Domestically, and just over $320 worldwide on like an $85 million budget. That's not bad at all.
Yeah, for a PG video game movie, like a lot of times you're not looking at those types of numbers. That's incredible.
Yeah. So and obviously it was good enough to get a sequel, and that sequel did well enough to warrant a third movie. And from everything I've heard, both those movies are really good. I just did not get a chance to watch them yet. And the only reason I didn't go see 3 was because I hadn't seen 2 and I didn't have time to watch it ahead. And I just didn't want to jump into 3 without having seen the second one.
Exactly. And I mean, they had a whole Max TV series with Knuckles, called Knuckles, or maybe it was Paramount Plus. Regardless, I'm curious how that went, and how much of the cast carried over. But then, I mean, I've gotten this spoiled already about new characters they're going to release for the fourth one. So apparently Jim Carrey said as long as he keeps being ass, he will keep playing this character. So we'll see.
I saw that with him, and I saw that with Marsden as well. They both said like, we'll just keep doing them. They really enjoy it. And you know what? I appreciate that. And I like that. I like when people are enjoying the thing that they're making, regardless of if it's for you or not. Like maybe Sonic isn't your deal or whatever. That's fine. I just love the fact that they're making these things. You know, I am watching right now the Fast and Furious movies for the first time. And one of the things I like is they're having fun with them. And you get that sense, you get that feeling.
Another pop culture reference. He references Vin Diesel in Fast and Furious by saying "family" or something in the car. I was like, it's funny with all that. Or another one when he wakes up, he says, "Is The Rock president?"
Yes.
Sorry, I just had to fire all these off because I wrote all of them down.
Oh, that was a good one.
Fast and Furious is a series I want to rewatch, and we have a few friends who said, yes, watch it from the beginning and watch all of them, because I watched through Tokyo Drift, probably I was in high school or college, and then I stopped watching them, and then I turn around like, how many have they made?
Yeah, 13, I know.
14.
There's 10 movies plus a spinoff, so 11 movies in total out of that whole thing, and it all got started from an article in a magazine. That's the crazy part. One other thing in this movie that you have to suspend some disbelief for. I know. Crazy to think in a movie starring a 3-foot-tall anthropomorphized blue alien hedgehog, you got to suspend some disbelief. But they want me to believe that in the year 2020, there was a working payphone booth.
It's true. Yep, that's very true.
I loved it, though. I love that moment. And he gets into it.
Right outside a gas station, too.
Yeah,
man.
It's crazy. I was like, wow, I haven't seen one of those. And I mean, there's none left here. There haven't been payphones in forever. So I
And
thought
heck,
I
if
just
if I if I ever seen a payphone box, it's been like retrofit with Wi-Fi, so you could call
right,
somebody in the phone booth
exactly, yeah.
or something. That's
Um,
hilarious.
no, this was super fun movie. I'm really glad you finally got a chance to watch it. I like that that you got a chance to see it, being a fan of the Sonic games too. That's even that
Mhm.
much better because I'm sure there was a lot of stuff you probably appreciated even more than I did, just being a fan of the games, like little things that I probably didn't notice or didn't register
There
consciously for me.
Yeah, there were a lot of Easter eggs, but I feel like there wasn't overwhelming. But there was a lot of times like I would point like, "Oh, look at that! Look at that!" Very exciting stuff. Like his whole cave and just how he. But like you also built a whole brand new like again, Sonic has lore, so you're expecting this lore in their own world and their
Mhm.
universe, and they completely said we're going to do something different for everybody, so everybody can get a brand new, fresh story. And you're not going to go ahead and take a look at that. We'll throw some Easter eggs in there that make it exciting, but
And that's a
I think it
great
encapsulates it.
yeah, I think that's a great way to adapt something like this is
Mhm,
pull some of it, but also tell your own story.
mhm.
Because you're not adapting a novel, you're not adapting a direct comic book. You're adapting some video games, which by their nature are, especially early video games, were just looser with stories. So take the characters and some themes and adapt those and tell an interesting story, and then you can once you've established like this movie established something. Now I'm really curious to watch 2 and 3 to see do they go deeper into the lore now
Mhm.
because now they've sort of said, okay, we can make a Sonic movie, we can make it work. Now we can go a little weirder with it. We can go a little deeper with it. So I'm
Yeah.
really looking forward to that. I'm assuming, like me, you're going to watch the others.
Yeah, so I actually, I almost decided to. So my wife brought up, was like, "Well, do you want to watch 2 and 3 while they're here?" And I said, "Well, I want to keep one fresh for this recording because I don't want to put 2 and 3, and then all of a sudden I kind of mix up which was what." So,
I almost
yeah,
did the
I'm
same
probably gonna
thing.
end up doing that.
I literally almost watched 2 today, and I was like, no, no,
Mhm.
no. I need to keep one fresh in my brain because I will conflate and I will start pulling more stuff. So, but I'm going to be
Yeah, and
watching those for sure.
oh, absolutely. And again, they're 90 minutes in and out. It's like I can really appreciate a shorter movie that the pacing works out really well
Mhm.
and the storyline's great. And I mean, I'm a fan. I'll analyze dramas all day long. I'll analyze book adaptations all day long. But when it comes to like video game movies, I just want it to be fun and fresh and exciting. So
Yeah,
when you hit those, everything else is gravy to me. So I
absolutely.
enjoyed this top to bottom. I'm assuming I'll enjoy 2 and 3, and the fact they got greenlit 4 and that you had an Amy reference. Now we're getting like deep into the lore at that point.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But I love that. Like for me, I don't care how long a thing is, it's the pacing of that thing. I don't
Mhm.
care if it's a 90-minute movie or if it's a 3-hour movie. If the pacing is good and can keep me engaged, then I'm fine with it. Whether it's Emperor's New
Mhm.
Groove at I think 78 minutes was that one, or The
Yeah.
Green Mile, which is 3 hours long, doesn't feel like a 3-hour movie because it's paced well.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm looking for. This was paced great. I did because the Sonic 2 was going to autoplay when I got done watching this. And I did notice that one
Same
is a
here. Yeah.
little bit longer. It's somewhere around 2 hours. But again, they've established a world now. So now they can play a little more in that sandbox. So you
Mhm.
can go a little
And
bit longer.
you're building more characters. So now
Mhm.
all of a sudden we're going to learn more about them. And clearly because of this whole brand new plot line, it's going to explore characters from that other world finding Sonic in this world and what that means.
So that was one other thing. I want to touch on this real quick because I don't want to let this movie go without mentioning. I think it was absolute brilliance on their part to only introduce Sonic and Robotnik in this movie.
Mm.
It would have been very easy and very tempting to bring us more characters throughout. Like we got Longbeak, and for a cameo in the beginning, we get a cameo of Tails at the end.
Mhm.
But to have the bulk and the story be centered around Sonic and Robotnik is smart because you have a lot of characters, but like for instance, what made the MCU work, and especially in its early days, was they didn't oversaturate every movie with too many characters.
Mhm.
They gave you enough that you care about what is on screen, and then slowly they can add more. And by the time of Avengers, you now have got, half a dozen to a dozen characters, and you can have little one-off side characters and little like Easter egg characters. but you gotta get the bedrock and establish that first. So by not having Tails or Knuckles or any of these other characters popping up in this movie and just Sonic, makes you care about Sonic. So then moving forward, when you introduce more, you now care more about them.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot, and it also in this particular plot line really hit home of fish out of water essentially.
Mhm.
If you were to say, oh, now Tails is going to show up because we've never been introduced to Tails at all, you get like 5 minutes of quick exposition with Longbeak and the echidnas, and if you're not even paying attention, don't even realize they're echidnas, an echidna army or whatever.
Yeah.
But like that whole like 5 minutes, you go like, okay, well now he escaped and that's great. For everyone else who knows the lore, you go, oh, I understand what's happening here.
Mhm.
You didn't need to, and it also kind of made that more important that Sonic is truly alone. So when you get that after credit scene, then it's, oh, hey, look, now it sounds like they know where he is, and you're going to see more characters. But I've already been introduced to this. I understand what these characters are doing. I know Robotnik's already going to be a consistent villain because we know he's alive. So we're going to create that. I think you're right there, and I always wonder if that was part of like what this movie was like 20 years in the making. If this was part of rewrites and what they were going to end up doing, and if they finally stamped and greenlit on this end. Or if this is just one of those things, once you start writing it out, you go like, okay, we're already at 90 minutes. We can't really go too much further if we introduce anybody else. Because like, I always go back to like Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man 3, when like you have so many characters and then you introduce Venom just kind of like as a last ditch at the end. It's supposed to be a tentpole character.
Yeah.
And it just, that to me is like the epitome of like what not to do when you're doing a movie like this based on original IP in a different medium.
Absolutely, because that is the textbook version of the studio wanted Venom because it's going to be more marketable. And the filmmaker was like, but I've got a story that I want to tell that doesn't involve him. And the studio says, well, we're paying, you're going to put him in the movie. And so he's like, fine, you want Venom in the movie? We'll put Venom in the movie. And you get what they did, which wasn't great.
And you're going to get Topher Grace and you're going to like it. Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's just some mismanaged casting, and it's not anything against Topher Grace. He just doesn't fit what I feel Eddie Brock should have been. But that's the case of just jamming too much in. That was my biggest issue with Spider-Man 3. It was my biggest issue with something like Batman v Superman. Was Warner Brothers was trying to get to the Avengers in their second movie instead of building to that, because they felt like they were behind, so they had to like speed run it. And that doesn't work. You need time to care about what's going on and focus on things. Another example was the Tom Cruise movie, The Mummy. Which, they tried to put too much too quickly into that to set up a shared universe instead of telling a story and then letting the universe build from that. This movie was smart. This movie said, we've got a story. We're going to tell that. We can put an Easter egg or two here and there. We can have a little tease at the end, but it's a self-contained. It is this story first. That's the important thing, is tell one thing, focus it, tell it right, do a great job with it, have fun. And then if more comes out of it, cool, and go with that. And that's what made this work.
So like huge love of the studios for going with that, because you could have said straight up, yeah, we need to have Tails, Sonic and Tails. That's the thing. You got to add Knuckles. Knuckles, it's like those are all 3 different games that happened. So you can go ahead and start with just let's get Sonic on screen so people adapt to it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm curious to see if they had original animation or original looks for Tails and Knuckles too. Those original looks would have looked like.
Yeah, that would be curious, because they definitely, like Tails especially, has a very kind of childlike look, even more so than Sonic. So I'd be curious. No, look, I'm so glad you got to watch this, and this was a great conversation. Thank you so much for being here. I've been wanting to get you on for a little while, so it was nice to finally like get in touch and make this work. So let people know, what have you got going on? Anything that you want to promote?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I'll say thank you so much. I think this is such a cool podcast concept. Not only are you watching new movies, but you're getting other people to watch new movies and just talking about them like you would just kind of back and forth. And I'm sure this is making you a much better, much more knowledgeable in film too, just as you go through and seeing what the different viewers do. You said you're past 300 episodes. That's incredible.
Yeah, 308 now. And
awesome.
it is, I love to talk about movies, and you're right in that it does make me not only view movies in different ways, but also kind of just the way I consume movies and the way I talk about them. I pick up
Mhm.
so much from so many of my guests. So I really appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, that's cool. I'll just say I'm Anthony Vito. We found each other through Dragon Con. I volunteer with Charles McFall's team with digital media at Dragon Con, which is fun. I'm going to be doing it again this year.
Mhm.
But part of that, I'm a podcast producer and editor. I've done over 1,700 episodes across 53 different shows of editing and
Wow.
producing. I am also a co-owner of the Bay Area Examiner, which little bit of a pivot, but we cover University of South Florida athletic department, and I've been their producer for 5 years as well. So nice little sub venture, but I do enjoy also joining people on their different podcasts and talking about whatever we can. And I will definitely be watching Sonic 2 and 3. So if you ever want to talk about that, I'm always free.
Excellent. Definitely. We'll definitely have you back for sure. And now I do this show weekly, and I do live stream it, twitch.tv/tvstravis or youtube.com/@tvstravis for the live stream. And you can always find the links for that in at my website or on all the social medias. I'm TV's Travis everywhere. Next week, I've got Jonathan Newport coming back. We're going to go in a little bit different direction. He wants me to watch Stranger Than Fiction with Will Ferrell. And I'm all about it. I haven't seen this one, so this is going to be a new one for me. I'm very curious. I've heard good things, so we'll see. So that's going to be what's coming up next week. And like I said, you can find me on all the socials. You can go to my website, tvstravis.com. There's links to merchandise with my logo on it. You can also join the Patreon. Patreon.com/WYHS is what helps keep the show going and also lets me do things like going back to Dragon Con, which I'm doing this year, and going to the TMS Vegas meetup and doing the show live there. So those kinds of things are a big deal that that Patreon helps me to be able to do. So if you can, I very much appreciate it. And if not, if you just listen to the show, hey, I appreciate that too, because that's why I do this. I do this because it's fun, because people seem to enjoy it. So Anthony, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to have you back at some point.
Exactly. I have one last quote that ends up being my favorite quote from Sonic 1.
Yes.
It's when he is riding a bull, riding the mechanical bull at the piston pit, and he says, "Is this bull missing a head, or does it have two butts?" Have a great night, everybody.
Just remember to enjoy your movies, and in the words of Keanu, be excellent to each other. There's one way you haven't seen.
And our blue devil, who, as everyone can see, is a very real creature and not at all invented by me.
Oh, I loved that moment so much.
Just way too funny. Oh my gosh.